If you were to ask 1,000 different people who Txiv is, you will probably get 1,001 different answers. But how many of them are actually true? In today's episode, we will do our best to separate fact from fiction and figure out who Txiv really is or was. Hello and welcome to another episode. If you like stories like this one, then please consider subscribing to stay up to date with our latest releases. There are many legends about Txiv, but there is very little historical evidence to back up any of these claims. As such, much of what we know about Txiv comes from oral histories passed down through generations and various myths that have been created about him over the years. One of the biggest obstacles to figuring out the truth about Txiv is that there are many myths surrounding his name alone. In fact, there are so many different ways to Romanize his name that we don't even know for sure how it sounds. Some of the more common Romanizations include Gi Chi, Kijong, Chong, and Shi. It is entirely possible that all of these are simply different ways of Romanizing the same name. But because so many of these characters are used in Chinese to represent different concepts, they can all also refer to different people. For example, the character for Chi can refer to a type of bird. So it is possible that one Z could be a literal translation of Birdman, while another Z could be referring to someone entirely different. The name Z itself has also led to much confusion, since it is an extremely common Chinese surname. Many people share this last name, which means that when reading ancient texts that mention Qi, it can be difficult to tell if they are referring to a person or a clan. Despite the confusion, one thing is for certain. The name Txiv was most likely not a title, as some sources claim, but instead a personal name. This is based on the fact that in ancient Chinese texts, titles were almost always placed behind a person's name, never in front of it. So if Txiv was a title, it would most likely appear after the person's name. Instead, we find that names containing the character Qi appear at least as far back as the 16th century BC Shang dynasty. So if he really was just a man, as opposed to a mythical or legendary figure, he would have been given a personal name in addition to the title bestowed upon him by his peers or enemies. Fortunately, we don't know what his personal name was, if he had one, nor do we know who he was related to or where exactly he came from. What we do know is that in ancient times, the Hmong people told stories about their ancestors migrating across the mountains from somewhere. In the general vicinity of modern-day Hunan province, according to Hmong mythology, they did not migrate into China on their own, but instead they were brought here by Txiv. While the Chinese government denies the MM's claim to being indigenous, anthropological studies have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are among the oldest ethnic groups living inside of China today. And all signs point to them having lived in the region for thousands of years. Given that the Hmong people existed long before the first written records of Chinese history were kept, it is safe to say that much of their history has been lost to time. And the only way we have of learning about their past is through their oral histories and other primary sources. According to the Hmong people, Txiv was a great leader who united many of the mountain tribes under his banner and led them to victory against the tyrannical Emperor Yan Di. He is remembered as a hero who protected the weak and stood up against evil. In Hmong culture, he is revered as the national hero and founder of the Hmong nation. His legacy is kept alive through festivals, songs, and dances that are still performed to this day. Most of what we know about Txiv comes from one book in particular, the Classic of Mountains and Seas. This text was written during the Warring States period around the 4th century BC. While it does contain some factual information about geography and nature, much of the book is devoted to myths and legends. As such, it should not be treated as a reliable historical source. Still, it is one of the oldest books that mentions Txiv by name and gives us some insight into how he was viewed by the people who lived around him. The Classic of Mountains and Seas describes Txiv as a gigantic man who was either the leader of a tribe or a clan named Qi, or the leader of an army of 200,000 demons. He is said to have had 4 eyes, 4 ears, a green face, and red beard, and a body covered in scales. According to the text, Txiv fought against the emperor and was eventually defeated, along with his 200,000 demon soldiers. However, the description of Txiv in the Classic of Mountains and Seas is vague and contradictory, and may have been intentionally left open to interpretation. For example, the text states that Txiv was as tall as 12 feet, but later says that he was as tall as 9 feet. This could mean that the author wasn't sure of his exact height, or that the text was written in a symbolic language that exaggerated certain features for emphasis. Additionally, some of the descriptions of Txiv, such as his green face and red beard, could be symbolic representations of the Hmong people themselves, rather than an accurate physical description of Txiv. Green is an important color in Hmong culture, often representing nature and the mountains, while red symbolizes courage, strength, and blood. This interpretation is supported by the fact that the text describes Txiv as having a body covered in scales, which could be a metaphor for the mountainous terrain that the Hmong people inhabited. But regardless of whether or not he was a literal giant, one thing is clear: Txiv was considered to be a powerful and fearsome warrior. In fact, the word Txiv may have originally been a title meaning brave one or strong one. This fits with the descriptions of Txiv as a fierce fighter who led his people to victory in battle. The classic of Mountains and Seas also tells the story of how Txiv taught his followers how to fish with nets, which may symbolize the spread of agriculture and the domestication of animals among the Hmong people. This is significant because it shows that Txiv was not only a warrior, but also a leader who cared about the welfare of his people and wanted to improve their way of life. He is credited with teaching them how to fish with nets, which may symbolize the spread of agriculture and the domestication of animals among the Hmong people. This is significant because it shows that Txiv was not only a warrior, but also a leader who cared about the welfare of his people and wanted to improve their way of life. It is also worth noting that the classic of Mountains and Seas is not the only source that mentions Txiv. He is also mentioned in the records of the Grand Historian, which was written by Sui Makian during the early Han Dynasty. In this text, Txiv is described as the leader of a confederation of 9 different tribes, who rebelled against the Emperor Yandi. According to the records of the Grand Historian, Txiv and his allies were defeated by the emperor's grandson, Shen Nong, who is believed to have invented agriculture. This version of events is clearly a myth, as Shen Nong is a legendary figure, and there is no evidence that agriculture was invented during the time that he lived. However, the records of the Grand Historian does provide some additional details about Txiv and his confederation. It states that they lived in the area between the Yellow River and the Yangtze River, and that they spoke an unintelligible language. This suggests that Txiv and his allies were not just one tribe, but a collection of different peoples who banded together to form a loose alliance. Unfortunately, there is very little information available about who Txiv really was or what he accomplished during his lifetime. Much of what we know about him comes from myths and legends that were written down centuries after he supposedly lived. This makes it difficult to separate fact from fiction and leaves many questions unanswered. Nevertheless, the stories and myths about Txiv provide valuable insight into the history and culture of the Hmong people and the ancient Chinese societies that they interacted with. By studying these stories, we can learn about the beliefs, values, and traditions of these ancient cultures and gain a deeper understanding of their place in history. The Hmong people have faced persecution and discrimination throughout history, but they have managed to preserve their culture and identity. Their traditional clothing, art, and music are still practiced today, and their stories and myths continue to be passed down to younger generations. Txiv may be a mythical or legendary figure, but his legacy lives on in the Hmong people and their rich cultural heritage. While the legend of Txiv is fascinating, it's important to remember that he may not have been a historical figure. The stories and myths about him are likely a combination of fact, fiction, and symbolism. Nevertheless, they provide a valuable window into the history and culture of the Hmong people and the ancient Chinese societies they interacted with. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below with your thoughts or any information that you might have about Txiv that we didn't cover in this video. We would love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.